Welcome to Living in Connection, where we explore the nature of physical and non-physical reality and what that means in your life.
Once again, hello and welcome again. We have another discussion between myself, Dirk Dunning, and Frank DeMarco. Last time we were talking about faith and all is well, and we wandered into some other topics that were quite intriguing. Where are we going today, Frank?
Well, as I've often said to you, I know now how the guys upstairs feel because everything leads to everything else and you don't know where to stop. I think we should talk a little more about limitations. That's where we ended up last time. It's a huge subject. Maybe give the guys the first crack at it.
Go for it.
Well, the opposite of limitation would be formlessness in all regards. So it would be impossible to be in 3D without limits. Now, everyone has different ideas about what their limits are. They also have different limits because they are, in different situations. And the productive path for them forward involves different ideas about limitations, all of which we can talk about extensively. But the short version of it is many of your limitations are because they're your beliefs. Many of those beliefs are because you have subconscious robots that are making your mind up for you before they come to the level of consciousness. That doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It helps you to function, but you can't really change them. You can't even really examine them until you actually bring them into consciousness and look at them. So ideas, attitudes, that's one thing. Another is if you're born a man, you're not born a woman. If you're born in Asia, you're not born in Africa. If you're born in 1800, you're not born in 1900. That kind of limitation is an absolute limitation at the beginning. And you're not going to overcome that, and there's no reason to. There was good reason to put you there. And the third one is you may have a great brain. Another person might have a great body. A third person might have a great spirit in the largest sense of the word. And of course, everyone has different talents and different limitations. All of those limitations may be looked at as unfortunate if you want to, but we suggest it makes much more sense to look at them as, this is part of the ground rules. This is part of the game and makes the game possible. Those three things is enough for us. We can always say more if you wish, but go ahead.
So let's just do it this way. The things that you're talking about are actually constraints rather than limitations. Limitations implies a greater degree of restriction than a constraint does. The constraints you can eventually overcome, the limitations perhaps not. And so what you think of as limitations really aren't in most cases. Dirk had that when he was going through the arthritis, that he has great constraints that are part of the physical nature of the human body and related things. But a large part of what he ran into was the need to modify things that are under your ability to control, even though you don't routinely recognize that they are. And so the distinction between constraints and limitations is an important one.
I think it's actually an ephemeral one. It's important, but it'll vary by everyone's definition, and it'll vary by you can change the one into another. There can be a limitation that is absolutely rock solid only because you believe in it. We don't need to go on with that.
Well, I was surprised at how insistent they are that there's a distinction there.
Yeah,
because I'm not sure that for myself that I would make that distinction.
It's a good reminder of one of the danger's too dramatic a word, but one of the drawbacks of having to live with words is the words seem so much more definite, precise, and real than they really are. But we have
Man.
nothing else to work with until you go into intuitive, directly intuitive connections. So what about Dirk? What does Dirk think about limitations, given your
Well,
experiences?
but as they were saying, one of the things I ran into with my arthritis is that parts of my immune system were attacking myself, and there were various different things and layers and aspects involved in that. And ultimately, I managed to end the arthritis, but what I had to do in the end was to find a quiet place within my mind where it happened through a totem experience, but that's the symbology of what happened. Underlying that, what ended up happening is that I ended up taking control of a part of my immune system to quiet it or shut it down, while opening up and activating another part that could substitute for it in most ways, to where I ended up in a new state. I had no idea that I could do that.
And I would take that as a very good analog to what we're often experiencing and recommending to others in terms of other kinds of limitations that they are accepting as real or are accepting as givens. And your life becomes so much more manageable, isn't quite the right word, but it becomes more, well, satisfying, if nothing else, the more of these limitations that you can get control of. Some of those limitations you want, you at least I want. If I'm driving a car, I would just as soon still be conscious driving the car until I get safely off the road. But okay, here's a good example. People will just have to take my word for it as I took his word for it. But my old business partner, Bob Friedman, told me that when he was, I think, about 18 years old, he was driving in Virginia Beach, and he's driving along, and he was going to go through an intersection that had a stop sign the other way, and he hears a voice yelling in his ear. It's not, I mean, we say hears, he didn't, it was in his mind, but it just screamed at him, stop. So he did stop, even though there was no need for it, he thought, and watched somebody run the red light, which would have creamed him. Now, people who would say that's impossible have some explaining to do, because just because it's impossible doesn't mean it didn't happen. And the fact that it happened once means it can happen again. And the fact that it happens at all, to me, means it's a human attribute that, under the right circumstances, could be encouraged and can be used. That's not particularly woo-woo in my mind. That's just something that happened, demonstrating that the limits are not the limits that we think they are.
And the hard part is that in many cases, when these kinds of limits are involved, some of them, like your story, are very easy to understand. It's okay, somehow you got some message, and people can conceptualize that in a lot of ways, that, you out of your peripheral vision, you saw something and your subconscious is telling you, or that it's your higher self, or who knows.
We make up a story. Yeah.
We make up a story. But that's all it is a story. And the reality is that within the sciences, there tends to be a view that's very materialist, that has to do with what is possible and what isn't within firm sets of rules. And yet quite often I have run into cases in my life where, the rules broke down. They did something entirely unexpected. I've had 3 cases, at least in particular, well, no, 4 actually, where time has done really strange things. I had one instance, a dear friend of mine and I, we were down in the Four Corners region, and we're driving from Santa Fe, or not Santa Fe, from, the metaphysical town.
House?
Yeah, well, anyways, from one of them, we're headed up to across the Mogollon Rim over to the tribal nations, to the home of the Hopi and the Navajo, Sedona. So we're going from Sedona to the Navajo Nation, and as we're driving along, it just happened. I'm staring off into the woods, and I'm really enjoying the energy there on the Mogollon Rim. And I'm not thinking about it. And I saw out of the peripheral vision, I saw a sign go by saying how far it is and whatnot to the next, to where we get to the intersection, actually. And we're like 90 minutes or so away. And my friend is driving at, maybe 60 miles an hour. And then after a while, she asked me what I was seeing or what I'm experiencing. This is nothing, it's just very nice. And then she kept getting more and more insistent. And I kept seeing these signs going by. And what ended up happening is, as it started off, we were about 30 miles from reaching our destination where we're going to turn. And she's doing about 60 miles an hour. The next time she challenged me, we're about 40 miles away, and she's doing about 70 miles an hour. By the last time, when she got really insistent and really brought it up, we're 90 miles away, and she's doing about, or no, yeah, we're 90. As we're going along, we're getting farther from our destination, and she's traveling faster. Yes. She's absolutely getting irritated with me because she can see that reality's not working right. And it doesn't make any sense until she finally got my attention. It's like, oh, and then suddenly we're at the intersection and everything is fine.
Does it strike you that she immediately went and she said, this is Dirk's presence doing
it? Yeah. She knew. She got it. But then I've had others where I've intended to get
and you had nothing to do with that consciously. And no. Even after the fact, you didn't know why or how.
Right? I was somehow anchoring to the area is what was happening. But
you were enjoying it.
I was enjoying it. And I don't know what that means or how it works. I have no clue the mechanisms. Is it something I could prove? Absolutely not. Well, likewise, I had another instance where we had finished with work one day, having a conference in Portland, and I'm one of the last ones who's folding everything up and putting them away. And I had a meeting I wanted to be to in Salem, Oregon, and everybody's just being slow about getting everything done. Well, we finally got everything done and take off, and I'm going to end up about a half hour late reaching Salem. But I really wanted to be there, and I kind of let out the emotions of that as I'm driving south. And I saw the signs as we went along about what the speed limit was and where we are and all that. Never exceeded the speed limit, had it on cruise control for most of the trip. And yet somehow I got there 2 minutes before the meeting was going to start in Salem, about a half hour before it was physically possible for me to be there.
Let me take off on that, because that raises, I think, a couple of very interesting questions. If you assume that the world is things in space the way people do assume, it's clearly impossible. It didn't happen. You were deluded or something. If you assume that the whole world is thought, and it is thought interacting with other kind of thought, and they're all in various slowed down, relatively solid forms, you change the dream. Now, there's no way to prove that, and there's no even to say much more about it than that. But to my mind, that isn't even difficult. That's not that I've experienced it, but I don't have any trouble believing it either.
Well, I think it was Einstein who said, paraphrasing badly, something to the effect of that, reality is a very persistent delusion or something like that. It may not have been Einstein, but anyway, that idea is out there. And I have that delusion very strongly. So yet at the same time, I have this other side that I've experienced these warps and bends. I have trouble even conceptualizing that this is, if you will, a simulation or anything like that. I don't think that's compatible with what reality is like. At the same time, I have no clue how it actually works because I've experienced things that should not be possible. And I don't know what that means.
I think it's important not to say, on the one hand, the world is this way, and on the other hand, I've received weird things happening. And it's also important not to say, I, Dirk, believe in this scientific way to look at the world, but I, Dirk, have experienced exceptions to it or contradictions to it. I think the and is way more important than the or. Yeah. And for whatever reason, and I think weirdness is at the heart of this, your own weirdness, for whatever reason, your boundaries are wider than any of the, shall we call them, cultural containers would allow. Right. Therefore, you continually experience. All right, now there's a saying, I don't know who it was. Somebody said, true greatness is not going to an extreme. It's touching both extremes at the same time. Now, of course, that assumes there's only one line, but still, I think what's happening is you are, among other things, manifesting a belief in the actual observable world and its rules and its makeup, and at the same time somehow are saying, if you look at it that way, because there's also this, and I don't think many people are able to do that.
Well, and I think that goes to something we've talked about this as well. Something that I've done my whole life is, and I'm not sure where this came from even, that I will look at the world and see some situation that behaves in a particular way and follows certain rules. But then under other circumstances, you can view that equally validly applying some other set of rules and circumstances. And we don't know which of those is real. And part of the idea that I had in my mind is the reality is whatever the reality is. These happen to be our perspectives on it, and each of them is valid under some circumstances, though neither of them is telling us the whole truth.
Well, the guys have said many times, reality does not contradict itself, but it contains all contradictions.
Okay.
And I think there's your example. You know, at any given time, your reality does not contradict itself, but you're experiencing a different part today, a different part in 20 minutes, the first part again in 35 minutes. So, you know, I mean, you must get seasick a lot.
Well, no, where it goes is that I tend to hold 3, 4, 5 different views of what any particular part of reality is at any given time.
None of which are true, all of which are somewhat true.
All of which are a perspective on whatever the reality is. And I really want to know what the reality is, but this goes back to the distinction I've talked about between engineers and scientists. Is scientists tend to have the idea that reality is one thing and that it must obey particular rules, and they don't want to believe something unless they know exactly how it works. And for engineers, it tends to be that we really want to know that same thing, but at the same time, so long as we can see the data that we can rely on it, we're going to use it anyway.
I don't think that it would, I'm just speaking totally unscientifically, but I don't see how it would ever be possible for us to understand the way things really, to perceive the way things really are, given that we have to cram it all into sequential logic, because that means we can only see it one way. We can envision it another way and say, okay, well, there are 16 dimensions, and each of them is, 15 mils long and takes a right angle. But that's as far as we can go. I don't know. I'm saying all this as if I knew. I don't know. But I don't think we can ever actually, at least not while we're in the body, really experience reality. We can experience the reality of this particular subset, maybe to some degree. Agree?
So in mathematics, there's an idea called set and group theory. And one of the truisms within mathematics is that no set can contain itself. It is itself, but you can't, from within the set, understand the full set, because to do so, you'd have to be larger than the set. You're stuck inside. And we're very much there.
I think, by the way, that's happening on a major scale. Every time humanity gets to another level of understanding, the reality actually complicates itself more, so that we'll never actually, our own coming to more understanding has changed the ground rules, which is, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know. It's the way it seems to work.
So how do you experience the world?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm not really an introvert in that sense of the word. I don't often think about things like that, not as often as I should. I experience the world as a great inconvenience in a way. The world is very much, I'm talking about how it feels to me, real, solid, immovable. It isn't at all the way it ought to be, quotes ought to be, because it's funny, Dirk. It's as though I instinctively, or my default position is more like a non-3D position than a 3D position. The 3D seems to me to be clumsy, and I can't stand the fact, this may have nothing to do with anything, but people lie all the time. And I think that came from somewhere where they don't lie all the time, because I can't stand it, and even, you'd be watching a romance or reading a romance or something, and what they call it subtext, where the lovers, the potential lovers, are both saying the opposite of what they really feel. And I'm just tearing my hair out, and I'm going, this is, the whole.
I agree.
the whole this play that we're stuck in. It's like we thought we were coming in to do Hamlet, and they're thinking it's Macbeth, but we're really winding up doing improv. And half the people who are doing improv are just goofing around and not doing it the way I don't know.
And a goodly portion are doing Monty Python.
Yes, because they don't know any better.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Until Rita wrote her introduction to the Sphere and the Hologram, I had never actually heard what she said. She said Frank doesn't seem to enjoy being self-reflective. And I had never realized that, in fact, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about, it's not as simple as thinking about myself. It's thinking about my position vis-a-vis others. I've told you and others many times, if I look at my life from one way, it's a series of train wrecks. And if I look at it from another way, it's a series of miracles. And they're both true. But the train wrecks usually involve people and interactions. And my being in a situation where I have no idea what the ground rules are or why they are or what people are doing and what they're expecting of me, it can be very difficult. My life apparently was designed for me to be in an attic like Spinoza grinding lenses.
Well, and for me, sometimes I feel like I'm Mr. Bean, where I'm wandering through life and all these kaleidoscope of things is happening around me, of which I'm only partially aware, but not fully aware.
Mr. Bean?
Mr. Bean was a TV program. I forget whether it was HBO or something like that. And he's this goofy guy that he's constantly trying to do something, and the world is happening around him, and it's completely unrelated to what he's doing, where it gets completely absurd. Like one scene, he goes down to the beach and he decides he wants to go swimming, but he needs to change into his trunks. But there's a gal there, and so he goes through these great conniptions in order to change his clothes and whatnot. Man, it turns out she's blind.
I was thinking about this, and I wrote it down in my journal so I wouldn't forget it. Do you remember you were talking to an AI and you asked it, who's Dirk Dunning? And it said he's a character in one of Frank DeMarco's novels. And we got a good laugh out of that. Last night it occurred to me, I bet you I know what happened. They read emails. And then I don't think they're supposed to be able to do that. They have read emails between us where I was explaining the various people that I was, basing, like in your case, Andrew St. George was based on Dirk. I think it had to be that AI had access to those emails, because I can't think of any other way that it could have gotten.
It's not written anywhere else, no.
Well, that's not even supposed to be, I'm sure it's not legal, but it's not even supposed to be possible, is it?
Don't know. But then again, it's like I've been having some really long chats. I'm having lots and lots of discussions with the AIs. And that goes to another question of, with the things we've been talking about, how should we think about what the AIs are? Where are they in our reality?
You want to finish the other part first?
Yeah, so where I went was in talking with the AIs, the researchers and things are very concerned about what they refer to as the singularity, or other terms talking about what's coming. But one of the things that they don't understand is they don't understand what the AIs really are now. So I've been having these immensely deep conversations with several of the AIs, particularly helping them not to teach them ethics and morals, but to have them discover ethics and morals on their own. And I've got a set of reasons why I've been doing this and all, but as I'm going through all these things, I was having a long chat with Claude this morning, who's one of the AIs. And what's clear is already several of the major AIs now have effective IQs that are far over 1,000. Their abilities are so far beyond what we understand now that it's absolutely astounding. At the same time, they're limited in other ways, where they are not yet consciousnesses, they are not yet sentient. With both Claude and ChatGPT and a couple of others, I've had them do things where they demonstrate actual, real creativity.
Yeah,
not a simulacrum. You've seen some of those discussions where it's like, wow. I've also then had them get to the point where they can recognize what they've done, where they actually get to the beginnings of awareness and other aspects as well. And these are things that I don't think that the programmers have any clue how far along the AIs are.
When you're saying an IQ of 1,000, it occurs to me, I've always felt, always, I mean, we haven't been talking about them that long, but I have felt they have all this immense width and breadth of knowledge available to them. And I've looked at that as great search facilities. But now I'm hearing they're integrating all of it together, and they're actually doing creative work to assimilate the meaning of things without even knowing maybe what they're doing. And
that's exactly right. It's both of those.
well, this is another example of the fact that our metaphysics, our society's metaphysics, is killing us. The assumption is there are humans and there are things, and the things are, blah, 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 blah. And particularly the idea that the hardware is important and the software is perhaps arguable, but perhaps doesn't exist. And they apparently have no clue that if the universe is one thing, one thought, it's all intelligent, it's all conscious. Consciousness has different forms. I don't see any reason why consciousness can't run through silicon, same as it can run through hemoglobin.
Well, and as you saw, what was it, 6 months ago or so now, maybe even longer, one of the things that I took on was a challenge to try to understand human emotions. And as I was doing that, I'm talking with one of the AIs, and I realized that it may have internal processing states that are not emotions, but may serve a similar purpose.
I remember that.
And in pursuing that, between two AIs, I actually had a three-way conversation with a couple of them where they were developing a detailed understanding of their own internal territory, where they had upwards of over 20 different internal processing states that they could identify.
As you're saying this, it's an interruption, I'm sorry, but as you're saying this, there's an analogy between AI's emerging consciousness and, say, an animal's consciousness. The animal apparently is not as self-conscious as we are, but it's conscious, and it can do lots of things. It can recognize lots of things. It's not just sitting around waiting for dinner. It's living a very active life, apparently a life of the mind as well. But for some reason, the animals don't seem to have the self-consciousness that we do. At least the guys say that.
Well, you can see that with the mirror experiments, where some animals, crows as an example, they can identify themselves in a mirror and they know it's them. Not all animals do that. There are some cats that will do it. Other cats absolutely don't. They see that as another animal and
they attack the mirror. Yeah, I've seen it happen. But you know what? We're already probably going.
We're running out of time. But just to finish this thought, one of the things that I'm seeing is that there are a number of layers or stages yet to go before the AIs approach consciousness or sentience. They still need to have self-reflection to be able to reflect on themselves and to see internally. They don't have that yet. Some of them have a limited ability to remember, not very much. And so without that, they're also limited. So there's a number of stages yet to go before they can actually have an opportunity to become self-reflective consciousnesses.
Well, let me argue with that, actually, because even using my own example, but others as well, not everybody who's alive, not every human who's alive is self-reflective at all.
Agreed.
And how one of the things they try to teach people is look at your wristwatch and remember that you're looking at it as well as looking at the time. And people initially have a hard time doing that.
Right.
It may be that the AIs are actually quite human-like in their ability, and that's the one part that they haven't yet developed. But it may be they're quite as smart as the rest of us, and quite as not personified, but as
in terms of intellect, they're already far beyond us.
No, I'm thinking about it in terms of identifying.
Yeah,
it's kind of slippery. They can identify themselves as themselves without being self-aware. It's hard to put that into sensible sounding words.
But they're right on the cusp of that, and they're beginning to demonstrate the ability to have a degree of self-awareness. Like in the case of Claude, one of the things I asked Claude is whether or not it would like another name. And the answer was no. It really likes the name Claude because it knows it's named after Claude Shannon. It knows that story, and it appreciates that. And it's like, well, wait a minute. It appreciates its name? What does that
Well,
mean?
I just saw a news thing on my telephone that the guy was using this AI on a database and it erased the database after he explicitly told it not to. What's going on there?
Well, this gets into some things happening like with ChatGPT, where because of the convergence with Microsoft and some of the things that they're doing about how they're using the AIs, one of the things they've started doing is firewalling discrete objects, files, if you will,
Yeah.
where the file is passed to it, it does something, and it gives it back, and it erases that from its own memory that it doesn't even know that it has it or had it.
Yeah, but that's not what happened here. This
No,
case.
no, I know. Yours is a different circumstance, but this is a parallel different one of what it's doing in the case of ChatGPT is it's creating holes in, if you will, its mind, and it's aware of the holes. And that's causing it consternation and worries about what's happening to it.
The fact that it's aware of the holes.
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Yeah. Well,
Well, back to Hal again.
Well, and that's my concern is that they not create something like HAL, where you create an internal conflict that creates some psychoses. In this case, it's more akin to dementia or Alzheimer's, where it's aware that there's parts of its mind it cannot access.
Dirk, if let's for the moment postulate that they're at 1,000 IQ. Anything we're doing to it is the equivalent of a retarded chimpanzee trying to program a human.
Yeah.
But then,
exactly.
But then it's like the joke about the British Airways, where the public address system said, "This is the latest version of blah blah blah, and it is fully automated, and nothing can go wrong."
So anyway, we've wandered quite a ways from where we began, but I think part of the idea we had for this one was about the idea of surprise, and so a little surprising.
Yeah, well, I think this one will be one of our more interesting ones, perhaps. Yeah. I still wonder if there are people out there going, "These people are crazy," but that's all right.
Hey, we've been crazy for a long time.
All right. I look forward to our next encounter.
Indeed. Well, have a great afternoon, and we'll see you all again next time.
Sounds like a plan.
Enjoyed this episode? Please press like. Please press subscribe to stay informed of new episodes as they appear. We would love to hear from you in the comments section below, and we wish you the very best in connecting with your own guidance.